You actually. Well, so good morning, good afternoon, good, I don't know, maybe evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us here at one of the last CBEY Pathways events of 2020 spring. A big thanks to Amy Batner for setting up this webinar and chatting us through Philistine Zoom woes just a minute ago, and to Heather and to Stu for kind of spearheading this program and being able to put it on with these resources. So a few like Zoom rules or whatnot. I see you all are like popping into the chat. That's cool. Feel free to do so. I feel like that's like a casual place, but if you want to go ahead and ask questions, please use the Q&A function. That's the way that all panelists and all guests can go ahead and see what questions you all have, so you don't ask twice, or maybe we can see which one is more popular. And then kind of, halfway through or a third through, I'll kick it over to you all to ask your questions. To kind of intro what this series is about. So Pathways in Business and the Environment brings together sustainability-oriented professionals to campus or to Zoom to discuss the work that they do and the journeys that they've taken in their careers. By sharing their stories, speakers provide a set of possible roadmaps for students to follow or avoid. From the outside, roles at the intersection of business and environment can be difficult to navigate. This Pathways series aims to give students an idea of the day-to-day details. Events in this series are engaging, interactive, I hope so, with a focus on practical career guidance. And now to welcome our special guest, Lauren Phipps. So Lauren leads the circular economy strategy, content, and coverage as GreenBiz's director and senior analyst on circular economy. Lauren launched the largest circular economy conference in North America, serves as the conference chair for VERGE Circular, and writes a weekly column of business and climate with an emphasis on value chain engagement and cross-sector collaboration. Previously, Lauren managed business and environment at GreenBiz Group. She holds a BA in environmental analysis and sociology from Pitzer College. And then kind of on a personal note, Lauren's an absolute rock star, far beyond this professional bio. I've had the pleasure of knowing Lauren for many years and seen her dedication to our environment blossom across the sustainability spectrum. Lauren and I actually went to college together. We studied tropical rainforest ecology in Costa Rica. We put together an off-grid solar project in Ghana together. And whenever I see Lauren speak publicly, I'm always sure to send her mom a note letting her know how proud she should be of such an exceptionally bright, dedicated, and kind soul Lauren is. We can't hear you, but please give Lauren a kind of digital warm welcome. I wish I could even have my little like Zoom clap emoji, but that's been removed from my side here. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So to kick it off here, Lauren, I'm wondering if you can kind of fill in the gaps of this introduction, basics about who you are, where you grew up, and kind of your initial pathway to where you are right now as the Director of Circular Economy at GreenBiz.
Thanks, Robert. And thanks for everyone joining us here today. So Robert said that we've known each other for a long time, 10 years, maybe. We've also been very, very close friends for the entire time. So look forward to a very candid and silly conversation, because that is how Robert and I chat. And if you're looking for me to be buttoned up and very professional, then please come to one of our conferences. But I put together a couple slides per Robert's request to walk you through really briefly about my path and kind of what I do. So let's see if I can successfully accomplish that. All righty.
Cool.
Okay, we can all see it?
I can.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, my path more or less. So I am from Berkeley, California, really liberal place. My first job was selling tofu, which a job that I got from when I was volunteering at the farmer's market. So I don't think I could be more Berkeley in my sort of start to semi-professional life. As Robert mentioned, we went to Pitzer College together. We both happened to double major in environmental analysis and sociology, although I have him beat because I also minored in Spanish. At Pitzer, the focus is very grounded in sustainability, and the approach is really sort of grassroots, looking at kind of the way that social justice intersects with the environment, a lot of conversation around environmental justice. So I spent one summer working at a nonprofit in East LA called the Healthy Homes Collaborative, doing tenant advocacy work and lead abatement work, or advocacy rather, for folks living in that area. So my first sort of thought was, I'm gonna be like an organizer, do EJ work. But pretty quickly I realized, like, I'm a privileged white person. Well, I already knew that, but in terms of my work, like, that's not where I should be doing this work. That's just not the place for me. So move forward a little bit to when Robert and I were in Costa Rica studying tropical rainforest ecology. I spent the summer after that working for a company called Ecofiltro in Guatemala. It's a social enterprise that makes water filters in Guatemala. Something like 90% of the drinking water is actually contaminated, so it's the biggest water filter company there. I became very excited about this social enterprise model, and brought me and Robert again. He's really a feature of my path. It really should be a co-presentation. We got a grant to do an off-grid solar project in northern Ghana, focusing on solar and women's empowerment and all this other great stuff. I won't get into it all right now, but my thought was, like, capitalism and good. I didn't want to be thinking about kind of the cycle of funding for nonprofits. It just seems so challenging. But then again, I realized, like, what can I do in my position, and should I really be doing this given the platforms that I have and the reach that I can have, and as well thinking about the potential for scaling. So graduated from Pitzer and then had the thought, if you've seen the movie Finding Nemo, all the little, the fish, they escape from their tank and they're in their little bags. They're all like wrapped up, ready to go. And they're like, oh my gosh, now what do I do? That was very much me. I knew that kind of the scale, environment, sustainability thing is what I wanted to do. Didn't really know what corporate sustainability was sort of in the mindset that I think a lot of undergrads are once they graduate, of like, cool, like, what does that translate to in the real world? So I briefly worked as a barista, glamorous job, which I actually always wanted to do, and it was great. And found my way through a friend meeting my now boss at one of GreenBiz's conferences, accosting him on the dance floor as he tells the story, and ended up getting this job at GreenBiz. So I started in biz dev at GreenBiz, worked on sales for 2 years, but at a high level, just to give some background on what the company is if you're not familiar, we're a media and events company, and we focus on the intersection of business, sustainability, something that you all know very well in your program at Yale. The biggest part of what we do is we put on big conferences. So we have a conference called GreenBiz, which is kind of the big corporate sustainability leader gathering in Phoenix every year. We do research, we have an editorial team and write a bunch of stories. And we also have a networking group for sustainability leaders. There's a theme here, from big companies that convene a few times a year. So that's GreenBiz at a high level. I did the biz dev thing because it was sort of a job. It was a foot in the door into corporate sustainability, which I really at the time did not know what that meant. But you know, the best part of GreenBiz is that I feel like we're kind of a hub for all of this work that expands so far, and I get insight and direct connections to this huge network that's doing all this amazing work, and my job is really to support that. I was thinking about leaving GreenBiz. Biz dev wasn't for me, but then I got the offer to go into this circular economy role, which I've been doing for 2.5 years. I've been at GreenBiz for 4.5 years, just about, which is wild to me. So the two big things that I do, I write a weekly column, newsletter, and I put on big conferences. These are the two like public facing, more glamorous parts of what I get to do. As Robert mentioned, I launched this big circular economy conference last year. We're planning another one this year. You know, depending on how things go, we'll have it no matter what. Might be more digital than physical. But basically, you know, circularity, which we can get into the details of a little bit later, is this big nebulous thing, and convening is a tool to help accelerate that market. I personally focus, and the event focuses around these different tracks. So it's not just like recycling or packaging. it's everything from design, food and water systems, engaging stakeholders, new business models, new materials, logistics, and infrastructure to make that all happen. Work with a ton of partners for the events. That's the most fun part of what I get to do is forge this network and a community to help push this work forward. I also get to do other fun stuff as a part of my job. I feel like my real job is to put on events and to write. But the way that I do that is getting to engage in all these other fun projects. So I'm on the board of the Ocean Plastics Leadership Network, got to go to Bermuda on a ship last year, which was so fun. I was a mentor for the Next Gen Cup Challenge. I'm a judge for the Food System Vision Prize at the Rockefeller Center, or Rockefeller Foundation rather. Oh, actually, I'm wondering now if the faces on the screen are blocking my screen. Robert, do you see yourself on the screen?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're up top. If not, somebody chat us. But I think we're up top.
Okay, I'm sorry if I'm blocking, but you get the idea. And now I can't see my mouse. What is this? Anyway,
you can see what circularity is.
Cool. Circularity at a high level. The way I think about it is it's a lens. It's not a specific industry or market, so it can be applied to pretty much anything. I think a lot about in the way that I convey this market and this idea is it's really this theoretical aspiration. It's kind of this big vision that's quite academic in a way that it's been understood, and part of my work, and I think the work of the industry, is to ground it in the next steps and the tangible case studies and proof points that it'll take to move things forward. So we need to sort of balance the visioning and the actual practical doing. And a lot of the time it's really only partially understood and practiced and embraced. It really varies in where people are starting. So I am happy to get into all of those details and to give more thoughts on that. And apologies if I've been blocking some of the screen with little people, but I think that should give you a good idea of what I'm doing.
Brilliant. Thanks, Lauren.
Yeah.
Hope you all now can see that I'm, the reason why I'm Lauren's biggest fan, and I don't know, I feel like I'm interviewing such a celebrity.
Oh, stop it.
It's true. So maybe we can get off that last slide here. One thing that I'm curious about at this kind of pathway in sustainability kind of intersection and circularity is how you transition from, kind of this generalist environmental analysis degree that we both received at Pitzer, and kind of really sharpened it, honed it, narrowed it to the circular economy at a time where, perhaps I hadn't, or we hadn't heard of that concept. How did that kind of come about? And then how did you become such shoot up to the top of when people Google circular economy? You're one of the top names that pops up.
This is why I keep Robert around, because he's just so nice to me and so supportive. So I think there's two answers. There's sort of the pretty answer and the real answer. The pretty answer is, at Pitzer, I did my senior thesis on sharing economies and sort of the basic building block of circularity, which is keeping items circulating locally in communities and what it takes to allow that to happen. At GreenBiz, we've been doing some circular economy coverage for 8 years, let's say, and just launched the VERGE Circular conference as our first event foray in its own kind of standalone way. But we've been doing a track at our GreenBiz conference for 5 years and 6 years now, I guess. And as I was sort of a new person at the company and kind of an up and comer, and it was, my CEO, Eric Thoreau, told me in my interview at GreenBiz, you're not a salesperson, you're not going to do this forever. And I did it because it was skill building. And I fully endorse doing that for at least a short amount of time, because the skills that I built doing sales have served me incredibly well. So, it was a very obvious path within GreenBiz, and I tend to like to forge my own path and not kind of do what everyone else is doing. So there was something fun that I think that the team saw that I was excited about in building something that really was not a saturated market. Now you'll see a lot more people talking about circularity, but when I started, it was fewer, even in just 2.5 years, recognizing that people have been using different words for a long time and the concepts aren't real. The more like real answer is, I did not know what I wanted to do. Sustainability is broad, and I have such a breadth of interests, which I think a lot of folks at Yale probably experience. I mean, I was never like the energy person or like the farming girl or anything like that. And I was okay with that fact. And this opportunity sort of opened up at the time. Circular economy, I probably would have said, oh, I think it's kind of like materials moving around. But honestly, when I got the job, I didn't really know what it meant. I just saw it as a good opportunity to push myself to trust that I could kind of figure it out, and to know that my company sort of trusted me to figure it out. We're a small organization. There's only about 30 of us. So I think that's the other piece, is I would never have the opportunity to build out this body of work for GreenBiz had I been at a huge, huge company.
So, I mean, it may be a smaller organization. Like, whatever, you're in the double digits, not triple digits, let's say, of personnel, but the way that I see GreenBiz operate and the way you operate within GreenBiz is really kind of curating, collaborating with, and collecting the real heavy hitters in the business and environment world. So I think a two-part question would be, one, could you give us a sense of who some of the regulars that you talk to are in this kind of space, what their roles are? And then kind of more of a personal note, I'm curious, like, how do you stand toe to toe with these professionals who may be, senior VPs of global companies who are, really working on some really tough issues, and then bring them in and then stand as a figure of authority within the circular economy field? I mean, that's a pretty impressive thing. And I'm curious on how you do that from more like a confidence perspective, or maybe where you get such knowledge from. Like, how do you keep with it in this kind of space, that kind of thing?
Well, thank you. I'll start with question 2. I started very much from a fake it till you make it sort of standpoint. In all honesty, that's kind of where it began. And the only difference between being a professional in something and being respected in it and not is just doing it and showing up. And I'm not a writer. I am not a journalist, and that's not my background. But I write every week. And I think that's been kind of the backbone for how I've been able to connect with so many people and for people to know me in the industry. It's wild to me because I'll go to a conference sometimes and people will be like, oh, Lauren, like, so nice to meet you. And I say that totally from a humble place of it's very bizarre to me, but really, like, writing and putting yourself out there, or putting myself out there, has been the thing that's helped me move forward. And once you do something enough, particularly if it's a relatively new field in its current iteration, it's a small pool of folks that are really talking about it. So it's pretty easy, if you have the dedication and the enthusiasm to work hard and to be in all the places you can and to ask questions, it's easier to create a network and move forward in the field. The people that I talk to a lot. Okay, so on the financing side, like Closed Loop Partners and Circulate Capital are two great allies. Work with them really closely to check in, hear their stories, and build out content at our conferences with them. On the sort of like materials side, Recycling Partnership and Sustainable Packaging Coalition, two other great allies, and then Ellen MacArthur Foundation as well. On the corporate side, the folks at Cisco are great allies and friends. Google, they're all, I'm naming the people that are doing a lot of intentional work around this. I talk a lot with big chemical companies, so good buds with the folks working on plastics, chemical recycling, and materials management at Dow. And then on the sort of like entrepreneurial side, I work with a number of like startup incubators and Biomimicry Institute on their launchpad. And this is just barely a snapshot because innovation is such a big part of it. And then I think the last piece is sort of big CPGs and apparel industry, both of you whom have been leaders in this. So it's really like a diverse network of people, which for me keeps it really interesting. But at the same time, I'm not a mile wide and an inch deep, but maybe I'm like a quarter mile wide and like 4 inches deep, or maybe half a mile and 2 inches. I'm not a deep expert in any one facet of circularity. For better or for worse, it allows me to do my job, which is to convene, to amplify, and to really try to accelerate something into more of a market to help professionals in this industry, whether it's, you know, Kate Brandt's team at Google, and, you know, the folks on Cisco's side thinking about every facet of their circular strategy, help them kind of push their step forward. But really, I'm not telling them what to do. I'm helping take their learnings and amplify that to the number of companies that have never heard of circularity, but could really benefit from employing some of those principles and really need to be at the table, especially as well.
Quite a host of people to name drop. I mean, you are deep enough such that, you know, you can give Kate Brandt a hug in front of people, or like fist bump Tom Zaki. Like, not many people can say that, although he does seem like a cool guy to fist bump with. So I hope that you all are kind of generating your questions. I'm going to turn it over to the kind of Q&A part in a minute or two. But before we get into that, like, I feel like I've been playing the game of like the dinner table game where you can't, like, how long is it going to be until you talk about Trump? But now it's about COVID. So I'm curious, I guess, at a zoomed out level, what are some of the trends that you've been really enjoying watching over like the past year, let's say, in the kind of circular economy world? And what are some of the ones that you're seeing pivot, transition, you know, fall off the rails these days? Kind of with mind to think about, many of the folks on this call are industrial ecology students or B&E students at Yale, and they're kind of trying to navigate things that they've been studying for a few years, but also where to go next, or what's kind of like the right direction to be feeling out. You know, who are the circular economy partners who are doing well versus maybe we're full of hot air, let's say.
Well, that's about 8 questions. Thank you, Robert.
Pick and choose or ramble. I like to do that.
Well, this is timely because I just did a webinar yesterday on COVID and the clean economy. And of course I talked about circularity, and I wrote my newsletter about that today. I mean, the big topic that everyone wants to talk about is plastics, just as taking a step back. So plastics, packaging, recycling, I get that it's a part of the circular economy. It needs to be. I think it's sort of like the gateway, so to speak, for a lot of companies to think about something that's really tangible and understandable when it comes to engaging in this big conceptual idea of a circular economy. To me, it's, you know, the bottom of the pyramid. It's not, I mean, if you think about your waste hierarchy, it's not kind of reuse and fixing things. It's sort of the lowest, not the lowest, but it's lower down. So for me, thinking about plastics and such is a part of the conversation, but it's not like my favorite thing and most impact oriented thing. But it's a huge material to manage and think about, and impact possibility is huge. So that being said, plastics is a huge thing, particularly given historically low oil prices. There's been huge health and safety concerns about reusables, which aren't actually founded in any studies that I've seen. There's been some not unsurprising lobbying and spreading of misinformation by some players in the plastics industry that have been citing some hilarious studies. Actually, if you read some of the things that they're citing,
come on, like, what, do you have one of them? Or maybe that's
one of them is one that was like funded by I don't want to misquote who it is, but it's like looking at viruses living on, and not even COVID. It was you know, maybe H1N1 or something, living on materials, but the reusable bag that they swabbed was like in this room with all these sick soccer players, where like in the bathroom where they've been like throwing up. It's a whole funny thing. So something to read afterwards.
It's a possibility. I don't know. Better be careful.
So it's all to say, you know, for reusables, which I think is a great and exciting market, navigating health and safety concerns is going to be a huge thing going forward, just being more transparent around those pieces. So, you know, I think that conversation has shifted and kind of paused slightly in the era of COVID around scaling of reusables, but I think it will continue. That being said, oil prices are a whole other thing, which are impacting the market for recycled plastics. So that's a thing. I get really excited about As I mentioned before, sort of the repair, product life extension, keeping our stuff better for longer conversation. And I think the coronavirus time has allowed folks to engage in that more closely. There's always been a culture of that. I mean, if you're not on your local Buy Nothing group, I would highly recommend it. It's way better than Nextdoor, which is its own problematic cesspool. But it's a way to, it's a gift-based platform. And they're expanding like crazy right now. And it's not the sexiest approach to circularity and this like visionary new thing. And it's really a cornerstone of what a circular economy needs to be. And I think coming out of this time, more companies are going to have to learn from what individuals are doing in communities, whether it's allowing for more like tool rental at whatever outdoor or home improvement retailer, or allowing for, you know, the purchase of used goods more readily, rather than going through, you know, a third party like ThreadUp or going to a Goodwill or something like that. So that's a piece that I find sort of interesting as well. I can spew off more, but I'll stop for now.
Great. I would follow up, but I'm going to go ahead and see if I can do this little Q&A thing just so we can open this up. So right now, all we have is Donovan, who I think you've met, asking a question here. Donovan, if you're listening and around, I'm going to try to promote you so we can make this look like a more of a fun, interactive thing than just me and Lauren bopping around here. Let's see here. All right. Donovan, do you want to go ahead and like share your screen here? Let's see here.
Oh, he's gone.
Oh, he's gone. Maybe I just kicked him off. That was one way to do it.
I think he can now unmute himself and ask the question live.
Yeah, hi. Hey, Lauren.
Hi.
We've got like a disembodied head here.
It's been so great to hear from you and to hear some of your remarks. Thanks for coming and joining the call. I had a quick question, which is now I can no longer see, but the question was related to your comment around wanting to pursue social justice and also kind of confronting your identity and positionality as a white woman of privilege. And so I'm curious about how that informs your work at GreenBiz and how you're thinking about business and sustainability and those other ideas as well.
I love that question. Thank you for asking that. So there's a couple layers to it. I mean, on one level, I try to bring in sort of community grounding as much as possible. I mean, we talked about, you know, the sort of three main points of what a circular economy is, and one of them is regenerating our natural systems, but it's also about regenerating communities. And if a circular economy in its theoretical form, or really, you know, whatever you want to call it, whether it's regenerative, whether it's resilient, whether it's sustainable, like, I don't care what words we use. But if we're recreating some of the woes of what sort of our existing capitalist-driven society has created, then we're not succeeding. Now, I talk to a lot of very corporate organizations, and so I have to be really strategic about how and when I use different language. But by and large, my sort of approach is sort of like getting inside the belly of the beast to a certain extent, but, you know, pushing back along the way, not allowing for problematic language, not allowing for not seeing the forest through the trees, grounding in community, grounding in impact, and trying to bring that conversation in as much as I think different forums can be pushed right now. But again, you know, it's strategic and it's really hard. It allows for some intellectual acrobatics sometimes. I mean, never did I ever, when I was in college, think that I would be like rubbing shoulders with like Dow's sustainability leaders and, you know, asking about their families and giving them a hug. Like it's very bizarre, and it allows, honestly, or it forces, honestly, a little bit of cognitive dissonance in that way. And I think, you know, any sustainability professional that's grounded in anything to do with social justice is going to have to face some of that as well. But the other thing I get to do is I have a platform that I get to use really strategically. And I get to bring conversations to the table that I think others might not. And so whether it's uplifting like Kashan Murray, who founded Detroit Dirt, which is like doing this amazing work around composting in Detroit, or whether it's like bringing the conversation around like informal waste economies and how that's connected to the work that's happening in the US, and really helping folks understand connectivity between kind of power and privilege and waste as well. Like I have the ability to connect some of those dots for people. But I think my personal challenge, and something I've been working on more this year especially, is pushing myself to bring more conversations to the table that I think might make more people uncomfortable. And as like a relatively young person in this industry, I sometimes feel a little bit fearful of that. But I think the more and more I do it, it only shows that people want to hear that and really need to hear that.
Thank you, Lauren. I appreciate your honesty and vulnerability there.
Yeah, thanks for asking the question.
Thanks, Donovan, for letting me trip up over this platform. Sorry about that. I'm going to see if I can try this one more time and get Rory Jacobson to ask his question and see if we can do like a video thing. Let's see here. So one sec, Rory. Okay, go ahead and unmute yourself if you'd like to.
Oh, hey, Lauren. Thank you so much for coming and talking to us. I know that GreenBiz might not be super involved in this side of the conversation. You talked a little bit about philanthropy, you talked about corporate commitments, but I'm sort of curious what role policy can play either at the federal, state, or international level to promote a circular economy.
Great question. They can play a huge role. I mean, if you look at how the conversation's evolving in Europe and, you know, Asia for that matter, which are both huge places to be clear, so it's hard to kind of glom them all together. But by and large, I mean, the EU is working really hard to create a circular economy. They have a circular economy package. They have mandated rates of incorporating post-consumer recycled content into packaging. They have like, you know, they have the power to push industry, you know, when it comes to circularity or environment and other contexts as well. It's a vital tool. In the US, it's really a shame that the federal government, not unsurprisingly, isn't pushing. And I think, you know, we talk a lot about how business can be the leader, but at scale, change is going to happen when it comes to circularity unless there's policy in place. So I see that as kind of the piece of the puzzle that really isn't front and center in the US right now. And most of my work, by the way, focuses on North America. So I am no policy expert on the nitty gritty of the European structure. But that being said, I mean, there's a ton of work happening right now, particularly around recycling for the US. There's a really cool collaboration happening between WWF, SPC, Sustainable Packaging Coalition, Recycling Partnership, and I'm probably, and Ellen MacArthur Foundation to try to create some structure for some of that, as well as a number of other organizations doing work around that. So really important, not happening enough. Please work on that problem.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Lauren, and keep up the hard work.
Thanks.
Oh, this is really fun. I like doing this little like boop bop, promote people. Melissa, if I can try this with you, I'm going to try to do one step above and see whether or not you can do your video. So give me 1 second here.
Hello.
Great. Let's see.
Did it work?
Yay, we can see you.
Hi, Lauren.
Hi.
How are you?
Good.
I'm so excited about this and so excited to see you. So my question relates to, in a way, to Donovan's question, but also to the column that you wrote about consuming our way to a circular economy. I loved every word that you wrote about that, because it's something that I think about a lot. So basically, this idea that as circular economy becomes a more mainstream thing, which is great because we need more, large corporations to adopt those principles, could it then be pushed into more of not necessarily greenwashing, but is it going to move into a more corporate direction of just getting more people to buy more things and calling that circular if the things themselves are better made or whatever it is? And how do you reconcile that with what I consider to be kind of like truer circular economic principles, like reuse, like secondhand, like smaller scale sharing platforms, and more grassroots things? So I love that you like totally called out that trend, and I hope that continues. So I'd just love to hear more of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's a both and at the end of the day. I mean, there's always going to be some waste, like full stop. People are always going to need to buy things, like full stop. And we're always going to have to use some virgin materials. Like, I don't see this sort of perfectly theoretical system ever really working at scale, but there's so much that we can do to sort of focus on those inner loops of the circular economy. If you've seen sort of the go-to butterfly diagram, it's like the top of the waste hierarchy stuff, reusing, keeping things better for longer. So I think when companies think about starting to work on circularity and start to talk about those principles and what they're doing, it's a real, it's very clear how they're thinking about that depending on where they're starting. And I think the real opportunity for companies is to enable some of those more impact-oriented outcomes. Repair, for example, is one where, you know, it's pretty easy with clothes, and those companies are much more amenable to you know, re-commerce and fixing things. And we're starting to see a trend in that, and which I think will lag a little bit based on coronavirus, given how impacted the apparel industry is. But that aside, it's not the same for electronics manufacturers. I would highly recommend, if you all are not familiar with sort of the right to repair work and debate and really political movement that's happening, that's about electronics manufacturers, for obvious reasons, wanting to keep their IP to themselves and not enable repair elsewhere. In practice, that's really at odds with product life extension. And there's a push to have repair be open and accessible to anyone who wants to repair things. So I think when you think about companies sort of co-opting the idea of circularity, like, yes, that's going to happen. I have a running list of terrible examples of things that companies are trying to sell as like circular. My favorite recent one was a company called Chop Value. They take used chopsticks and turn them into furniture and cutting boards. It's like, what? You're solving for the wrong problem. So not a good idea. But on the other hand, like, I think, you know, companies need to be a part of the solutions. And there's just different ways that they can do that. And I think the real thing that I try to think about is pushing them to do more impact-oriented stuff, while recognizing that my theory of change is like business horizontal, policy top down, and then grassroots bottom up as well. So you need all of those pieces working in relative harmony, and working through some challenges and tension to create the system that we're trying to build.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, nice to see your face.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Robert, for making that happen.
I'm trying here. I'm gonna go as fast as I can.
Nice to see your face too.
Nice to see your face too. Let's try one more person jumping up here. I'm gonna promote Professor Lissette. Let's see how this works. I'm gonna kick you off too, Melissa. Sorry.
Okay, bye.
Or you can kick yourself off. One of the two.
I don't know how to do that.
1 second. Withdraw co-host. Let's see here. So let's have Professor Lifset. You are now hopefully allowed to ask your question. You can put your video on, whatever your pleasure.
I can't get the video. Yeah, somehow I'm blocked on the video. There we go.
Oh.
Oh, you're at the beach. That's cool.
Yeah, believe it. I wish. I wish. Just clever Zoom backgrounds. So I have two questions for Lauren. First of all, Lauren, it's nice to finally meet you.
Likewise.
And one is, can you just point us to some more information about the WWF consortium? The other is, there's a problem with greenwashing, but there's also the problem about well-intentioned circular policies that have a negative net environmental impact. The one that immediately comes to mind is trying to get to 100% recycling of construction and demolition debris, where as you get closer to the 100%, it's likely that the greenhouse gas emissions are going to increase. But there's a lot of those. And, how do you deal with that in your work?
Well, that's a great question. So the first piece, easy answer.
Yeah.
So the WWF consortium, I'm hoping that it's actually public. If not, it will be very shortly. So you probably heard about some of the plastics pacts that are existing in other parts of the world. So it's a US plastic pact, basically creating a pathway for, with WWF, Recycling Partnership, Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and Sustainable Packaging Coalition, working together. And if someone has more info, please pop it into the chat. I don't have the deep dive on it, but basically working together to create an easy pathway for companies in the US to work towards their goals for recycled content, which includes, basics of packaging, infrastructure, and policy as well, if I'm not mistaken. But I'll happily send you info after we hop off, and I can fact check myself. And then the other piece is such a good question, because this is where the beauty of this theoretical circular economy needs to sort of be grounded in the harsh reality of climate, and why I kind of say, like, circularity is great, but it's not the end all be all. Like, continually cycling any material just for the sake thereof doesn't really think about what we're solving for. So, I think through a corporate perspective a lot of the time, and if a company has a climate goal, for example, and they're thinking about their packaging strategy, and you've got like a cucumber in a grocery store, if from a carbon perspective, it makes sense to use the little annoying cling wrap on that cucumber because it extends the shelf life, it prevents the more food waste, which has a higher carbon impact from, if it doesn't end up in a compost system. So I think the key is to think about what you're solving for and take it from there. I don't have kind of a one size fits all approach to those sorts of things, but I think when solving for any problem, like, it's just about systems thinking and connecting the dots between all of the intended and unintended consequences, and then making the hard decision about what are you actually solving for. If it's circularity, fine, but if it's not grounded in, science-based targets, if it's not grounded in science at all, if it's not grounded in climate, then you're not solving for sort of the right things, in my opinion. But I'm curious, actually, if I could ask you the same thing. How do you think about balancing those tricky dynamics with any sort of waste or anything else?
Well, for the poor students that suffered through my course in the fall, we talked a lot about this, that circularity is a means to an end. And there's a lot of development on the academic and policy side now around a partially competing concept called material efficiency, that basically says we want to do something about climate, and we only want to choose those circular strategies that actually reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But what I was asking was, you and I are on the same page about this, but I was wondering, do you have the opportunity in your role to call this out?
Yes. And I do, and it is hard. So I totally agree that circularity is a means to an end. I also think that convening and conferences are a means, not an end, and that's sort of the case or the thing that I get to build to create the opportunity for these conversations. So more and more, I'm seeing people really want to get into those tricky trade-offs and touch some of those thorny edges. It's not always very fun. And usually those conversations happen more material by material, just to make it more relevant. But I would also invite, if there are any conversations that you think should be elevated more readily to you, and honestly to anyone on the call, I would love to hear from you. I am always looking for more stories to tell, and I only know what I know, and part of my job is to keep learning every single day. And as I said before, I'm no expert in one piece of this. So please share more on what you'd like to see. And also we always have external contributors on GreenBiz. We've had a number of folks from Yale contribute in the past. So please, if you would like to do some writing, I would wholeheartedly invite you to that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, Professor.
Yeah, thanks so much for those questions. Really good ones.
I'm going to go ahead, and if there's anybody else, please do send us a note. Otherwise, I'll just kind of kick back and draw this more to a close here. Let's see. I'm going to mute you. Sorry, Professor. There we go. So, well, there's so much to react to and so much to ask you about. I think one thing that's on the top of my mind, though, is more of your discussion on like the right to repair, about more of this kind of this moment that we're experiencing where we're not as consumption focused right now, or like buying new, like whatever, the economy is not functioning as it normally does, which is a lot more consumption based. You're seeing, you know, interesting environmental outcomes of that, whether you were looking at, you know, the kind of most visible one that I've been seeing is like the clean air in Los Angeles and China and all these places that otherwise have more polluted air and whatnot. But I'm also wondering what that means for the things that break at home, or the things that you otherwise would be leaving your house to purchase or ordering more online if there's more disposable income, let's say. I'm curious if you can talk a little bit more about what you're seeing in terms of what that means for the circular economy. Who's kind of leaning into that? Who's leaning out of that? That kind of thing.
Well, I'll offer a shameless plug. I'm hosting a virtual event on May 19th and having a panel on just that conversation.
We didn't lead into that at all, actually. That was not even scripted.
It sounds like you're being sarcastic, but it actually wasn't. Not a lot of companies want you to be able to fix your things, particularly if it's your computer or, you know, something slightly more complex. But more and more we're seeing companies sort of lean into that. There's also this sort of like rebellious cowboy side of things with folks from, you know, Kyle from iFixit, which is an awesome organization, which I highly recommend you look into, and the Repair Association as well, which are basically trying to open source the design schematics for everything. And they're kind of at the forefront of this repair debate. But personally, I think a shift that we're going to see in the future is more companies trying to answer some of the questions for consumers of, okay, what do you do if it's broken? What do you do if consumer can't get to a store? You know, they could send it online or whatever, but the timing, especially right now, I mean, you're seeing people cut off. The stakes are a lot higher when we're talking about ventilators right now. I mean, it gets pretty real pretty quickly when you think about things that have higher stakes. So, you know, I think the conversation is changing a little bit. This discussion's been around for a very long time, but I do think that more companies will be amenable to discussing sort of reparability. I'll also say that's a little bit apples and oranges to think about repair when it comes to electronics and when it comes to clothing, for example, just really different considerations, and IP as well. But that being said, I think for clothing companies, for, you know, the REIs of the world and folks making gear and other stuff like that, the opportunity right now is they're thinking about shifting their supply chains, shifting their value to consumers. I think we're going to see more leaning into that opportunity, and many already are, which is great.
Good. I'm trying right now. I'm asking because my glasses have lost a screw, and I have like a little bread tie twist shoved into my little screw holes. Warby Parker's not getting back to me yet. So I did my own thing. Bringing this to a close, thinking about kind of zooming back out to like the Pathways mission. I think that so many of the folks that I see here on the attendee side are going to be graduating with me from a master's program, which in a normal year would be the kind of like dream, you know, degree to be running off with towards, you know, your dream job, whether that be in corporate sustainability, in circularity, in environment in general. And I think that one of the, you know, from being on a bunch of little job chats and whatnot, there's a lot of murmurs about hiring freezes. There are folks who have just had conversations stop or even offers withdrawn. And not that, you know, like all the, you know, hot, you know, like employing statistics for each company or whatnot. But I'm curious that as the economy does, hopefully it will kind of pick back up. Where are some directions that you think that graduates from the School of Forestry and Environmental Studies should be kind of leaning in towards more, especially within regards to kind of like the circular economy field? What are some initiatives or companies that maybe are not as exciting to you, or if you were in our position that you would not be running towards, that kind of look shiny? I'm curious on more of your in-depth and the folks who are hiring kind of perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have more of a crystal ball than anybody else, but take a step back, look at who's doing well and who's not. I think it's the first place to start. Like I'd say, I would have said in the past, a bunch of companies are thinking about getting into e-commerce, and so apparel is a great place to go. That's not a great place to go right now. Do not go there. But tech companies, many of them are doing great. Like I mentioned, Cisco, they're an awesome example of having a really distributed strategy when it comes to their circular economy approach that's broken into these 5 different pillars and stretched across the organization. And so tech in general, whether it's consumer electronics or something else, I think is a really smart place to go. I think that, decide for yourself what you think about kind of working on the chemistry, plastic side of things, but chemical companies are continuing to do really important work when it comes to the circular system, whether it's a Dow or Eastman or what have you. Like they're really deeply engaged in this conversation in their own way, and I think they're doing well. I think they're doing pretty well right now. I think that the circular side of their business is probably maybe slightly decreased in this moment, but I think that's only temporary. So those are 2 areas that I think, they're still going strong. I guess one more is the CPG side. Big brands are doing quite well right now. So, thinking about that piece. But I guess if you're like a circular person, I think it's great to bring that as one lens that you can bring to a company, but it's very, very rare that someone's going to hire someone with circular economy in their title. And as I said before, it's a lens that you can apply to anything. So, if you're in, and I'm sure you've all heard this already, when it comes to sustainability in general, like the advice that most professionals in that space will give is like, don't do sustainability, do the thing that you do and apply sustainability to it. It's the same for circularity. Now I say that to people with environmental degrees in some capacity. And I do not envy the position of graduating right now. That must be very challenging. But at the end of the day, circular economy, again, is a means. And if you can think creatively about how to employ those principles to navigate hardship, you can sort of paint a picture of how a value proposition can shift. If you're trying to meet consumers that have less money to spend right now, how do you create a cheaper product or a used product or something? How do you create a model to sell that and to really serve consumers where they are right now? I think that's going to be the key to this. So I wish I could offer more tangible nuggets that could really help.
Rats. I thought you were going to tell me where I should be applying to
get jobs, but you'll be fine. You'll be fine.
Thanks, Lauren. So that's most of what I've had here. I kind of wanted to take the last couple minutes to just kind of open it up just to you. If there's anything that we didn't talk about, that you kind of hope that we had talked about, any last kind of closing thoughts of things that you kind of opened up on this call but would like to close, or if not, we can just bring it to a quick wrap.
I think in general, one thing just about kind of my path and my approach that I think has really served me, and I think will serve anyone that's interested in circularity and sort of engaging in that concept. I sort of jokingly refer to myself in my LinkedIn bio and Twitter bio as like a solutions-oriented skeptic. And I say that in jest, but I also think that that's really, a key approach to grappling with complex issues like this. I'm probably the most skeptical person when it comes to any new circular economy thing, whether it's like a fully circular product or a new strategy for circularity to be fully circular. And I'm the first person to say, bullshit, that's not, like, tell me more about that thing. And to try to get deeper and understand sort of the different moving pieces. So I think not taking things at face value is really important when it comes to the subject right now. At the end of the day, though, we have to orient towards building something, to doing something differently. And you can get in this sort of spinning place of like, well, that's not good enough. Well, that's not good enough. And the balance has to be, like, as I sort of opened with, like, grounding this theoretical utopia of a circular economy that we really need to keep pushing towards, with sort of the solutions the companies can do right now, and recognizing, you know, the steps the companies are taking now, they need to be oriented towards this trajectory over here. And if they're not, then it's important to call them out and sort of stomp them out at where they might be. But, you know, I'm okay with half-baked and partial solutions right now, so long as they're not the end of the sentence. They're maybe the first sentence in a wonderful paragraph of a circular economy journey. So I think circularity is tricky. It's kind of not complicated, it's complex, and forces sort of balancing so many different moving pieces and considerations. But it is this really, really cool lens and vision that I think can totally transform the way that we do things. And I highly encourage everyone to use the term, to explore it more, and to help make it more of a thing, because I think the world will be better off for it.
Brilliant. Thanks, Lauren. Yeah, I mean, we're all into like half-baked solutions right now. I wish that I was, you know, thanking you in person at Yale. I know that you had this on your travel schedule, but we're all Zooming for now, and I hope that only one day I can be accosted at the dance floor like Joel. By you, sorry. Well, so thanks everyone for joining here. This webinar will be recorded, so if you have a friend who missed it, I'm sure we'll be pumping it out on the CBEY side. Many thanks to Lauren for taking time out of her busy Friday. Go ahead and register for her newsletter. I get it in my inbox every Friday morning, and it's always interesting, entertaining, enlightening, and a little humorous. Lauren, feel free to plug your digital conference, and hopefully see you all in person in August in Atlanta for Circularity 20.
Totally, yeah, and May 19th, join us virtually for, yeah, which should be a really fun conversation around circularity and these times, and how we're thinking about plastics and repair and reusables and all that good stuff. And thanks so much for having me. This was super fun. Robert, appreciate you. And to anyone listening in, feel free to send me a note. It's laurenp@greenbiz.com. If you want to chat more about anything, if you have unanswered questions, if you think that I'm wrong about something and want to enlighten me in some way, I welcome it all. And yeah, look forward to hearing from some of you. So thanks so much.
Many thanks. Thanks, Lauren. Thanks all. See you all soon.